Have you ever seen someone's arrogance and prejudice cost them everything in the blink of an eye? Well, this story is exactly that, a wake-up call for those who judge people based on their appearances. It was a busy Friday afternoon at the prestigious Crestfield Bank, a financial institution that prided itself on professionalism and an elite clientele. The polished marble floors gleamed under the warm glow of chandeliers, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne hung in the air. At the front counter, the bank's manager, Richard Collins, oversaw transactions with his usual scrutinizing gaze. Richard had been working at Crestfield for years and had developed a reputation for his selective customer service. To put it bluntly, he treated some customers like royalty, while others, well, let's just say they weren't always welcome in his eyes. Unfortunately, most of the time, the people he was rude towards weren't white. But today was the day that he would finally get caught out for his discrimination. And to put it simply, blatant racism. That afternoon, a well-dressed black man, Leonard Carter, walked confidently through the glass doors. He carried himself with the ease of someone used to high-level transactions, his tailored suit fitting perfectly, his leather briefcase in hand. For anyone who wasn't a racist, Leonard was the definition of a successful man. He approached the counter with an air of quiet authority, waiting patiently as Richard finished up with an older white gentleman, showering him with polite conversation and an over-the-top smile. When it was Leonard's turn, Richard's demeanor shifted. The fake pleasantries drained from his face, and a cold, almost disdainful look took their place. He barely glanced at Leonard before speaking. "How can I help you?" he asked, his voice clipped and void of warmth. Leonard remained composed, unfazed by the clear difference in attitude. For him, it was basically just another situation where the person over the counter was having a bad and long day. He placed a check on the counter, one with a sum that made the tellers nearby raise their eyebrows. "I'd like to cash this, please. It's drawn from this bank." Richard picked up the check and barely glanced at it before shaking his head, as if he knew something that no one, including Leonard, didn't. "I'm sorry, but we can't process this." Leonard tilted his head slightly. "Why not?" "It's well within the available balance, and the account is valid." Richard's lips curled in what could only be described as an irritated smirk. "We have certain verification procedures for checks of this amount. I can't just hand over this kind of money without confirming a few things." Leonard remained calm. "And what do you need to verify?" "The check is legitimate, the signature is on file, and I have identification. Whatever needs to be verified, I have it here. So let's get it done." Richard scoffed. "Sir, you need to understand how these things work. We don't just cash checks of this size for, well, people like you. It's not typical." Leonard narrowed his eyes. "People like me? And what exactly do you mean by that?" Richard smirked and leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Look, I don't know where you got this check, but let's be honest. Guys like you don't usually walk in here with that kind of money. Maybe try somewhere more suited to your needs." One of the tellers, a young woman named Claire, shifted uncomfortably nearby. She had seen Richard pull this routine before, but this was different. This was too much, even for him. Leonard exhaled through his nose, keeping his composure. "So you're assuming I'm committing fraud based on what? The way I look?" Richard chuckled. "I never said that. But between you and me, it wouldn't be the first time I've seen someone try to pull a fast one." Leonard shook his head slowly. "This is unacceptable. Do you treat all your high-value clients this way? Or is it just the black ones?" Richard shrugged. "We just have certain standards. You understand, I'm sure." Leonard stared at him for a long moment before shaking his head with a knowing smile. "All right, Richard, I see how this works." With that, Leonard pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Richard watched, arms still folded, unimpressed. "Calling for backup?" Leonard smirked but didn't answer. "Hey, it's me," he said into the phone. "I'm at Crestfield Bank. There's an issue with a check. Mind coming down?" Richard let out a small chuckle. "Sir, if you're calling the police, I can assure you they'll side with the bank. Policy is policy." Leonard didn't respond. He simply stepped to the side and waited. He waited for you to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Jokes aside, it's easy for you and it means the world to us. Thank you for your support. Now let's get on with the story. 10 minutes later, the energy in the bank shifted. The doors swung open, and in walked a man in an immaculate navy blue suit, flanked by two sharply dressed associates. The moment Richard laid eyes on him, his confidence wavered. The staff behind the counter stiffened as they recognized the newcomer. David Langston, the CEO of Crestfield Bank. He walked straight to Leonard and clasped his hand in a firm shake. "Leonard, my friend, sorry I'm late. What's the issue?" Richard's face drained of color. Leonard gestured toward him. "Richard here says my check requires verification procedures that apparently don't apply to other customers." David turned to Richard, his sharp eyes locking onto the now nervous manager. "Is that right?" Richard stammered. I was just following policy, sir. High-value checks require additional review." David cut him off with a raised hand. "Enough. I don't tolerate discrimination in my bank, Richard. This man is not only a longtime client, he's also one of our biggest investors, and you've just embarrassed yourself in front of him." The entire bank fell silent. People were shocked at the literal divine retribution taking place in their offices. Richard opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. He knew that this time, he wouldn't get away with it. His racism officially ruined his life. David turned to the nearest teller. "Cash Mr. Carter's check immediately." The teller, moving as fast as humanly possible, did exactly that. Within moments, Leonard had his funds, neatly counted and secured. He turned to Richard and offered a polite yet cutting smile. "Next time, Richard, try treating people with respect. It might just save your job." David sighed and looked at Richard one last time. "Clean out your desk. You're done here." And just like that, Richard's career at Crestfield was over. As Leonard left the bank, he turned back to see Richard standing there, frozen, his world collapsing around him. He shook his head, then stepped out into the sunlight, knowing full well that justice had just been served, piping hot. But the consequences didn't end there. News of the incident quickly spread across social media. Major news outlets picked up the story, and within hours, Crestfield Bank faced public scrutiny for their handling of discrimination. David Langston issued a public statement reinforcing the bank's commitment to equality and pledging to implement new training programs for all employees. Meanwhile, Richard found himself blacklisted from the banking industry, unable to secure another managerial position. Leonard, on the other hand, used his influence to push for broader conversations about bias in the financial sector. He funded initiatives that supported minority-owned businesses, ensuring that no one else would have to endure the humiliation he faced. His actions not only helped countless individuals, but also cemented his legacy as more than just a businessman. He became a symbol of change. Over time, Leonard's advocacy grew into a national movement, with banks and financial institutions forced to confront their biases and implement fairer policies. What started as one humiliating encounter turned into a catalyst for real, lasting change in the industry. And Richard? He faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of what happens when prejudice clouds judgment. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Was Richard's downfall deserved, or should he have faced even worse consequences?